I don't know how this happened, but I have a thing for orphan brands. Maybe it's something about rooting for the underdog, or maybe I'm just drawn to machines that tried to be different when the world told them not to be. Whatever the reason, I've always had a soft spot for cars from companies that didn't quite make it. You know, the ones that poured everything they had into a dream, only to vanish into the pages of history. And among all those forgotten names, Hudson, Nash, Packard, Kaiser, and others, the one that tugs most at my heartstrings is Studebaker. Even though the company went under long before I was born, I've always admired its courage. Studebaker wasn't content to follow. It was a brand that believed in doing things its own way, whether that meant introducing radical designs, experimenting with new materials, or trying to take on giants with a fraction of their resources. If I had the choice, I'd probably get a Golden Hawk because I've always loved that blend of muscle and elegance, but I'll admit the Avanti has always had a kind of magnetic pull. It's more than a car, it's a statement. One of those rare machines that embody everything their maker stood for, both the ambition and the heartbreak. The Avanti story begins in 1962, though really, its roots reach back much further. Studebaker had been around since the 1850s, back when the company made wagons for farmers and soldiers. By the time automobiles arrived, they'd already built a reputation for craftsmanship. They survived longer than most independents, too. But by the early 1960s, the writing was on the wall. The big three, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, controlled the market. They had vast factories, marketing empires, and financial muscle. For a company like Studebaker, surviving was no small feat. When Sherwood Egbert became president in 1961, he wasn't a car man by background. He came from the aerospace and machinery world, but he had something Studebaker desperately needed: vision. He saw that the brand couldn't compete on volume, so it had to compete on character. The plan was simple: build something bold, something so striking that it would capture the public's imagination and revive the company's spirit. That car would become the Avanti. Egbert turned to one of the greatest industrial designers of the 20th century, Raymond Loewy, the man behind everything from the Coca-Cola bottle to the Lucky Strike logo. Loewy understood that good design could tell a story, that a car could be a sculpture as much as a machine. Working with a small, dedicated team in Palm Springs, California, Loewy sketched and shaped what would become one of the most daring American cars of its era. When it was unveiled, the Avanti looked like nothing else on the road. It didn't even seem to come from the same planet as the other cars of 1962. The long, clean nose, the recessed grille, the flowing roofline. It was a shape ahead of its time. Instead of chrome excess, it offered restraint and aerodynamics. The fiberglass body gave it an almost space-age quality, echoing the optimism of the early 1960s, when everything from cars to architecture was inspired by rockets and jet planes. Underneath that sleek exterior was a Lark chassis, reworked for better handling and rigidity. Power came from Studebaker's faithful 289 cubic inch V8, an engine known for its reliability and surprising performance. But for those who wanted something truly special, there was the R2 package, a Paxton supercharged version that boosted output to 289 horsepower. It may not sound earth-shattering today, but in 1962, that kind of power put the Avanti in the same league as the Corvette and Jaguar E-Type. Studebaker sent one to Bonneville, where Andy Granatelli and his team used it to set 29 world speed records. The car topped 170 miles per hour, an astonishing figure for a production car at the time. For a brief moment, the Avanti was the fastest production car in America, and perhaps the most futuristic one as well. Egbert had done it. He had created a car that could have changed Studebaker's destiny. But fate wasn't kind. The fiberglass body, built by an outside supplier, caused endless headaches. Panels warped, molds failed, deliveries ran late. Dealers had eager buyers but no cars to sell. Studebaker hoped to produce 20,000 Avantis in the first year. Fewer than 5,000 were actually built between mid-1962 and the end of 1963. By then, the company was bleeding cash. The South Bend factory closed, and just a few years later, in 1966, Studebaker exited the automobile business entirely. Still, the Avanti refused to die. Even as the parent company faded away, the car's mystique only grew. Its design was too good to be forgotten. Over the years, it became something of a cult icon. a time capsule from an era when American manufacturers weren't afraid to take risks. To own an Avanti today is to hold a piece of that daring spirit in your hands. And that brings me to this particular 1963 Avanti. It hails from Edwardsburg, Michigan, though it spent much of its life in the warm, dry air of California. It's remarkable how well it has survived. So many cars of that era succumbed to rust, neglect, or poor restorations, but this one stands tall, proud, and authentic. The paint is mostly original, with just the right amount of patina to tell its story. The interior remains untouched, right down to the gauges and upholstery. And most importantly, under the hood sits the numbers-matching 289 cubic inch supercharged V8, the same heart it left the factory with. When you lift that long fiberglass hood, you can almost feel the optimism of early 60s America humming beneath. The Paxton blower sits proudly atop the engine, its polished casing catching the light like jewelry. Back then, the idea of a supercharger in a family coupe was borderline insane. But that was the point. The Avanti wasn't built for people who wanted normal. It was for those who wanted to feel something extraordinary every time they turned the key. Only 1,552 Avantis were built with the Paxton supercharged R2 engine in 1963. Fewer still were equipped with the 3-speed automatic, which brings the total down to just 909 examples. How many of those remain in this kind of condition? Probably a handful, 50, maybe fewer. Every time one resurfaces, it's like finding a relic of a lost civilization, proof that once upon a time, American car companies had the courage to dream big. There's a quiet dignity to this car. It doesn't scream for attention like a muscle car or glimmer with luxury like a Cadillac. Instead, it radiates confidence, the kind that comes from knowing it was special from day one. You can stand back and look at the lines, that sculpted nose, those delicate fenders, the gentle sweep of the roofline, and realize just how advanced Lowe's team really was. Even today, more than 60 years later, the Avanti doesn't look dated. It looks timeless. Driving one is a different kind of experience altogether. The supercharged engine doesn't roar. It sings, building boost with a whine that rises in pitch as the car gathers speed. The steering feels solid and honest, the suspension firm but not harsh. It's not a sports car in the modern sense, but it was a driver's car before that term was common. The Avanti asks you to be engaged, to listen, to feel. In return, it gives you something that no modern car can, the sensation of traveling through both time and history. This particular Avanti is now seeking a new home, with an asking price of $54,900. The owner isn't open to trades, and I can't blame him. Cars like this aren't just possessions. They're heirlooms. According to Classic.com, the average auction price for Avanti are 2 cars in excellent condition hovers around $43,000, though several examples have sold for much more, up to $115,000 for the finest restorations. That puts this one right in the sweet spot. Authentic, well-preserved, and priced like the collectible it is. But numbers only tell part of the story. The true value of a car like this lies in what it represents. The spirit of an American company that refused to surrender quietly. When you drive an Avanti, you're not just moving metal and rubber. You're carrying forward the legacy of a group of dreamers who believed they could change the world with design and determination. There's something profoundly human about that. The Avanti isn't perfect, it never was. It was rushed into production, plagued by supplier issues, and born into a company fighting for its life. Yet somehow, out of all that chaos, came beauty. The car's very existence feels like a triumph against impossible odds. That's what makes it more than just a classic. It's a symbol of defiance. Sometimes, when I see one parked at a car show, I catch people walking past it without really looking. They stop at the Mustangs, the Corvettes, the Camaros, cars that have endless merchandise and movies celebrating them. Then, out of the corner of their eye, they notice the Avanti. It always draws them in. The longer they stare, the more questions appear on their faces. What is that? Someone inevitably asks. And that's the magic moment, when curiosity turns into admiration. Owning an Avanti is like being part of a secret club, one that celebrates individuality and forgotten excellence. You're not buying into a brand. You're preserving a story. The maintenance might be a little quirky, parts sometimes hard to source, but that's part of the charm. Every turn of the wrench connects you to a history that most people overlook. There's also a sense of serenity that comes with driving a car like this on modern roads. You sit in that wraparound cockpit, surrounded by the smell of aged leather and faint fuel vapors, hearing the faint whistle of the supercharger and the hum of the V8 beneath your feet. Traffic might swarm around you, but you're somewhere else entirely. In 1963, on an open highway, believing in the future again. It's hard not to admire how much faith Studebaker put into this car. They poured everything they had left into the Avanti, hoping it would be the savior of the brand. It didn't succeed in that mission, but it succeeded in something arguably more important. It gave Studebaker a graceful exit. The Avanti ensured that when the company's story ended, it ended on a high note, not with a whimper, but with a car that dared to be great. Even decades later, enthusiasts and small companies kept the dream alive. The Avanti continued in various forms through the 1970s, 1980s, and even the early 2000s, built by entrepreneurs who refused to let the name die. Each new version, the Avanti 2, the later GM-based models, carried a little piece of that original Studebaker DNA. It's proof that a great design never truly fades. When I think about Orphan brands, it's cars like this that remind me why I'm drawn to them. They represent not just what was, but what could have been. They're filled with ideas that were too bold, too idealistic, or too expensive to survive in the real world. Yet those ideas still matter. They shape the way we see cars today. The Avanti reminds us that innovation often comes from desperation, that brilliance can emerge from struggle. In its curves and contours, you can read the story of a company's final stand, a mix of elegance, ambition, and stubborn hope. That's why, even after all these years, it still feels alive. If I ever had the chance to park one in my garage, I don't think I'd ever tire of it. I'd spend hours just looking at it, tracing the lines with my eyes, marveling at how something so daring could come from a company on the brink. I'd take it out on quiet Sunday mornings, when the streets are empty, and let that supercharged V8 sing its nostalgic song. Not fast, not reckless, just enough to feel connected to everything it represents. There are faster cars, rarer cars, more expensive cars, but few carry the same soul. The Avanti isn't about numbers or prestige. It's about integrity. It's about the idea that good design and fearless engineering can make a small company stand tall, even if only for a moment. That's something worth celebrating, and something worth preserving. So maybe my fascination with Orphan brands isn't so strange after all. Maybe it's simply about honoring the courage to dream differently. The Studebaker Avanti embodies that courage better than almost any car I can think of. It's not just an artifact from a lost automaker. It's a reminder that innovation, art, and passion often bloom brightest just before the curtain falls. And for me, that makes it one of the most beautiful machines ever built.